Welcome, everyone, to the second season of Pfalzgraf's Empire State Entrepreneurs and New York Business Law podcast, a really fun and informative forum for us to showcase our clients, strategic partners, and community leaders to talk about relevant issues for entrepreneurs and business owners throughout New York. My name is David Pfalzgraf, and I'm so fortunate to be the managing partner at a local law firm called Pfalzgraf, and we're coming off the heels of our 25th anniversary celebration, which we hosted a couple weeks ago, and my guest today played a large role in that celebration, so we're excited to welcome my good friend Pete McGennis, and we're going to get to Peter in a minute, but before we do, I really want to take a minute to thank Mike and Eric and all of our friends at Incept for allowing us to host this podcast here in their studio. My firm's been using Incept for a number of years on a ton of projects, and they're just doing a great job for us. So with that, this isn't a podcast that I've been looking forward to for months, if not my whole life, because it involves my very best friend and someone I've known since literally the first grade, Peter McGennis. Can't be any more excited to welcome you to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave. This is an honor, and we have a history and a lifetime of friendship and a journey to kind of get through. So where would you like to start?
We could start in the first grade, but actually we won't bore our listeners with all the stories of our upbringing, although there's some fun ones that might be interesting and perhaps damning for one or both of us. But I thought maybe where we would start is just educating our listeners a little bit, Pete, about your background and growing up in Buffalo and being the son of a great entrepreneur and a school teaching mom, and tell our listeners a little bit about your background as you sort of went from high school to college, and then we'll get to what brought you back here to Buffalo.
Well, it's amazing that those memories have you too, because I didn't have a blood brother, but I had you, growing up as a city kid. So I spent a lot of time with myself, and I grew up in the house that's actually for sale now that I just took a walk through, and it was a rush of memories. But I grew up with a record player near my bed and, an attic playroom, where we spent hours and hours. And, I was always kind of role playing and listening and to music. And we were both heavily playing sports and, doing just an amazing childhood, having the city kind of as our playground. And I bring this up because this history, this would play a big force in kind of guiding me back in my career. So, it's so incredible that these memories often include you. And I would say that going to college, and we did wind up going. We didn't expect to, but we wound up going to the same college. But at that time, sports were very heavy in our lives, and I wound up dropping the hockey stick and picking up a guitar and becoming much involved in both theater and communication, which to me were the kind of precepts of storytelling and kind of, finding my own voice and realizing, helping me kind of take a closer look at myself, what I was projecting and what I really wanted to do, and yes, I had a third grade teacher who was for a mother who was incredibly nurturing, and I owe so much to my parents for allowing me to have that space to kind of create and play and still have this, drive of sports and this competitive element, which has been, prevalent in both of our lives. But all of this, I think, was leading me to some type of storytelling. I mean, I had enjoyed, acting and writing and directing and producing in college, the producing as well, which I found just as creative when it came to finding resourcefulness. But all of these components were like helping me kind of figure out what it was that I might want to do. So, I think that there was a business, there was an entrepreneurial spirit, but there was a storyteller kind of evolving through many of those years. And then to answer your question, transitioning after college, I had spent my summer college years out in Los Angeles, kind of, witnessing firsthand and working on movie sets and understanding what that dynamic could be. I was just, like everyone, kind of working for free, and just my only parameters were, let me be on set, let me understand this. Don't park me, making copies or doing something like that. I wanted to experience something that I wouldn't have had access to in Buffalo. And, but when I graduated, I had the special person in my life who I'm blessed to have been married to coming up on 30 years, my best friend and soulmate, Susan. And so I was kind of at a crossroads, It's like I didn't want to go out to Los Angeles. I realized what that would kind of take because I had a dress rehearsal, but I had this person in my life from Cleveland, Ohio. So I kind of had to figure out what to do. And I started to see Buffalo in a new way with this new person in my life, and the streets and the places kind of took on a new meaning. But I did have to find something to do, and that leads me to my first kind of entrepreneurial foray, which is starting a business, And I did, it was like the Bob Dylan song, 20 years of schooling and they put you on the day shift, It was like I was learning, I started to just make luggage, because my dad had made a bag for Hobie cats back in the 70s called Cool Cat that was kind of a way of transporting, cool drinks on a boat. And I was kind of looking at all the different ideas and things that had kind of come up. And, I never thought I would wind up, in this warehouse of but I started to look at it differently. And my uncle had just picked up a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, as many people and men, had back in kind of feeling the American graffiti kind of, rush that Harley-Davidson had kind of had a marketing renaissance in the 90s. And I started to think about, could I make that bag for motorcycles, And I wound up taking Cool Cat and turning it into Cool Sack and making a piece of luggage that would fit onto motorcycles. And honestly, 3 years later, we were picked up by Harley-Davidson. We became the only co-brand in their history, Harley Bisac.
Incredible.
And I've been to over 400 stores. I traveled the world. I, learned the mechanics of just kind of setting up a kiosk or a tent, whether it was a trade show or in the middle of Daytona or Sturgis, South Dakota, and facing customers. It was very much the mechanics of the theater and communication background that I had. It just wasn't the manifestation that I had originally thought. But I really enjoyed, there was a joy there of not only, often at these shows, my dad would come along and, there was a joy of working with family and just, being out on the road and, whether you were a touring musician or, whether you're, setting up shop and selling your wares, the mechanics kind of felt very, similar to me. So I think I was learning some lessons there that you might not think exactly what you were going to be doing as an entrepreneur, but it was kind of running on parallel lines with everything that I had kind of been training. So, there's lesson number one, don't necessarily think what you're doing is too far off of, is running perpendicular. You're still working on yourself and you're getting closer to whatever the next thing was going to be. So
it's a great lesson. I think that is, for any young entrepreneur, doing what you're doing today may not be where you end up ultimately, but man, there's some valuable lessons that can be learned along the way, whether you're selling, insulated bags for the back of Harley-Davidsons or you're making movies or storytelling. Mm-hmm. So some of that early, take that you got from traveling the world and trying to get in to Harley dealers to explain the your bag and why it was unique and could fit a need for their customers definitely helped you sort of pave the way for what would come next.
Yes. Yeah, we were breaking all of the rules. We were manufacturing cut and sew here in Buffalo on Elmwood Avenue. We had 2 shifts. We were making things here. It gave me such an appreciation of the dynamics of family business, which, I have a ton of appreciation for because I lived it, So there's a selfless quality, there's a patience, there's a discipline to accept other people's family members' spin on management style and kind of find compromise. And I'm not inherently a my way or the highway type of person. So I would naturally kind of move, again, back to the theater, to this generosity of spirit. And I think it served me well. I think I was able to distill, what I appreciated and respected and really admired on my with working with my dad, and then what I might do differently. So by the time the winds of change came, which they always seem to come, I think I was prepared as much as you can. And that happened in 2010.
How old were you? So how long were you focused on selling Cool Sacks? How many? What sort of duration?
Well, I started in '93 when I did my first show in Connecticut, and I wound up going to 2011, and I'm actually still doing it today, kind of as a hobby. But unfortunately, new corporate protocol, new philosophy entered the picture. It's ironic in an industry where you would think, made in USA would be tantamount, but our stuff was farmed out overseas, and I kind of got I call it the George Clooney open air kind of, the envelope, where I had that sit down in 2010 where I learned that news, and then by the next year we were not working with Harley anymore, and that was a big thing for me. So I mean, I have nothing but appreciation. I worked with them for 14 years. We scored so high on so many levels, but letting people go was a low point for me. That was adversity right in the face. It was kind of like free fall. Getting the axe. Again, doing everything that you possibly could, but things change, circumstances change, laws change, industry changes. We've seen that enormously over pandemics and different things that have come. So, at that point, adversity often hides opportunity. It's easy to say that in hindsight because it's painful when you're putting your head down on your pillow with 3 kids in school and wondering, I don't know what's going to happen next, but you just have to kind of cling to the foundation in your life and start taking the first steps again. And as Mark Twain would say, the secret of getting ahead is getting started, and you just start to take steps. And for me, I had been making films as a passion and as a hobby before that. I had helped films get started here in Buffalo. I made my first film in New Orleans in 2003. So that was long before the winds of, fate changed with Harley in 2010. So I was cultivating this passion where I was actually the first film to ever take place in a state tax credit down in Louisiana, and I witnessed the vitality and energy that came with that. I'm like, I want to bring this back to Buffalo. I want to do it here. I want to have my hometown as a canvas. I want to see what this how this works. And, I had in my hand kind of held down in New Orleans. I basically had a very good friend there. We almost had gone into production together right out of college. He was a very respected cinematographer down in New Orleans. And we made our first film on the coattails of a film called Runaway Jury that we just held crew over for 17 days and made a film. It was still an enormous undertaking for me. It's literally like, riding a motorcycle for your first time, and it's a Harley-Davidson. You usually would start with a dirt bike. So getting into that was a big jump for me. But, when the winds of fate changed, I started to think about, I if I'm going to start again, I would like to start, really from a place of joy of what I've been loving to do. So how can I convert this passion of filmmaking into a sustainable business here in Buffalo?
That's cool. Real quick, before we leave Harley,
yes, of course.
I'm sure our listeners are dying to know, you owned a Harley, as I recall, but do you still own that Harley? Do you still ride that Harley? Does Susan, on the eve of your 30th wedding anniversary, give you permission to ride that Harley?
That's okay. So I still have my first 1991 Sportster. I do. So I have taken that bike, and I share some memories. I mean, my hair is long, but I'm not, and I've done some miles. I mean, I have taken it down to Key West. I've taken it across country. In 1996, after a show in Durango, in Mesa Verde, I went for a ride with Susan, thankfully, on the back of my bike, and my dad riding his Road King. And my dad was hit by a deer going about 70 miles an hour. He bounced down the highway 90 yards. I resuscitated him. We got an ambulance there. Cell phone didn't work, so I had to wave down, the next car. 3 days later, we were driving home. He looked as purple as Violet Beauregard, coming out of Willy Wonka, and
good God.
I mean, when I came up to him on the road, his jeans were disintegrated. His boot was off. He's like, "I'm dying, son." I said, "Can you see?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "No, you're not. Just hang in there." And we had that crisis moment that was actually one of the most beautiful days in my life because, my dad is still with us. He did wind up needing a hip replacement many years later, but his finger, he left with a finger in his splint. He was all black and blue, but it was just one of those moments where my number came up and, the gas station before, I stubbornly asked my wife to stay on my bike, even though my bike is kind of a vibrating pain versus, it would have been much easier for her to go on that other bike that he rides. So I say this only because I feel like you're kind of guided by forces, and you kind of realize when something has happened. And my dad got right on a motorcycle, the year later. But for me, it was like, cost benefit. I had 3 kids coming, on the way, and it just didn't really feel like that was going to be a driver for me. So I still have my first bike. I know I just took 5 minutes explaining this anecdote, but these events shape you, and you listen to them, and you try to take away, what was kind of important, and I think it played its course. I still make the bags. We are still making grips and sending bags. It keeps a couple people employed, and it still brings joy. It's just, I felt like there was going to be another phase for me. There was going to be another calling for me, and I didn't expect it to come in the face of adversity, but as you know, Dave, it often does.
It's such another valuable lesson for our listeners out there that, in the face of adversity often lies opportunity. And as we transition to sort of storytelling and how that is your main focus today, Pete, I do want to talk for a minute about 2003 and this bold, brave, daring, some would say crazy idea that you had to do a feature film, a full-length feature film in New Orleans, Louisiana, at the age of probably 32 or 33. What sort of fear did you have of failure? What sort of excitement did you have to pull this film crew together? I mean, how incredible is part of your journey to think at that young age, while you were, a father and busy selling, bags for Harley-Davidsons, but how insane was it to think about filming for 17 days down in the bayou? And I still can't believe you did that, though I experienced it and lived part of it, that journey with you. Tell our listeners a little bit about what prompted that passion and what the results of it were.
I'm actually getting goosebumps because it was a crossroads in my life, and in so many ways, it was like Jack and the Beanstalk with, magic beans and throwing them out the window, none of it made sense. It came from a much deeper place that I alluded to earlier, that little kid in the room, and knowing that was like this place that has always been magical and wonderful for me. And it's like I had worked on other films, so I did know, both here in Buffalo, learning how not to make a film, and working on, you got to learn what not to do, and in addition to what you want to do. But I did that one in the traditional way that I knew. I was away from my family for six weeks down in New Orleans. Our youngest was 1. It was an enormous ask. It was like throwing most of my savings into doing something, and just witnessing that there was an opportunity here. I mean, I didn't understand the level of preparation and everything that went into it. So it was an enormous leap of faith, trading in a completely different currency. It was not a good move on paper financially to take this risk. I mean, I certainly, after making the film, and shopping around as a one-off, I started to learn so many things after the fact that, I didn't fully understand. But it was very scary. I mean, it was an amazing experience. I mean, and everyone walked away. It went safely. It went joyously. We wrapped, 3 days before Mardi Gras. It was a perfect example of like timing of, this is here. Do you want to do it? You've had a dream in your mind. The dream has seemed distant from you. As you've gotten closer, everything gets more real. The fear of failure, the fear of realities. Are you gonna do it? And I just think my DNA and my upbringing and encouragement in my life led me to going for it. And it's just who I am. It's just let's do it. And I wouldn't have been any different if I had not have made that film. But that was the big leap, because that was the commitment in. My closest critics were the people that I loved the most, because they were just wondering and coming from a place of concern and fear that makes it even more difficult, and I'm referring to my dad, my wife. I mean, and it's because they love me, and they realize that this is a pivotal thing. You're investing your time, your resource into something that is unknown. But I knew it was coming from this place of generosity. I knew it wasn't fame. It wasn't anything like I already at that point in my life wanted what I have, which was the prescription of happiness, at least one of them in my estimation. This was just something that I felt like, almost like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Jedi chamber, like coming out ready to do the battle. It's like I've been ready for this moment. And it seems so ridiculous, but it's like, it's one of the reasons why not many people make a movie, let alone now 7. It just takes, I knew it was going to take my strengths, and it was going to take my weaknesses and everything. But I felt like I had to go for it. And once again, it proved that unforeseen consequences of that led to other opportunities. It wasn't so much that film that was the turning point in terms of that movie went on to do X, Y, and Z. It was how I was translating myself and how I was seeming approachable to other people. And suddenly, there became commercial opportunities where some people who started to connect the dots, like, hey, maybe his gift or his drive or, talent for storytelling could work for me in some way. And so again, we begin to get this lost out of translation of who I am, which is still continuing. It's continuing every day. wouldn't it be cool if from this podcast someone's listening and says, hey, I'll give this guy a call and he'll write a jingle for me. You just have to give in that you don't know everything and you don't know where it's going. And if there's one thing that's, you go confidently in the direction of your dreams, as Thoreau once said, and you embrace the fact that you don't know where these things are going to take you, but you put yourself out there, and then suddenly you're beginning to make you're a torchbearer for here in Buffalo, and bringing films and you're on to the next chapter of your life.
How many? So 7 feature films, remarkable. I want to know if there's any in the queue that you're working on currently. But before that, how many of those were filmed in Buffalo? And give us your impressions of, I know you're close with Tim Clark and as the film commissioner, but how receptive has Buffalo been to you trying to pursue your dreams of filmmaking here in Buffalo?
Well, Buffalo has been amazing. I mean, I was never one of those that was a naysayer. I mean, when we first made Buffalo Bushido back in, I think it was 05 and 06, there was nothing else going on here. We were the only film independent that was that was made that year here. And we did have a tax incentive program that had just kicked in the year before, and Tim was with us on that. And I've never had to be sold on Buffalo. I have always, I think in my first, interview with the Buffalo News, like I told Jeff Simon, I relish being a warrior scrub from Buffalo. I mean, what that means is there's a connection, there's a city kid connection with so many other social circles, and, this was the same bus. I mean, I wrote that film. It starts at the same bus stop at Delaware and Delavan where I got out, where we would get off, to walk home. These are familiar streets. So again, suddenly the Play School Castle, in the attic of my childhood home was becoming Central Terminal or Memorial Odd, or, I'm dating myself there. But, I started to, come back to this kind of childhood lens of wonder that is really where I feel like I'm in a different place, and feel like there's an artist that is storytelling and creating. What's different about me is the fact that, I wasn't trained, easily to understand, oh, he's strictly an actor or he's strictly a guitar player or a musician. I was always kind of dabbling in all of these things. Guitar, I've been playing for years, but it's still always been like a toy for me. And I was starting to see these places and get my own kind of recipe for kind of storytelling that brought many disciplines, into its force. So, the path of an interdisciplinary artist is just a lesson in self-translation, let alone translating yourself to others. But it was, at that movie premiere where Steve Barnes came up and approached me and said, would you like to start, working for us? Or, and then other in terms of making commercials and similarly, We Love Our Town, a jingle that I wrote, for Wonderful Family, the Downings, and work with them closely. It became this passport of connection, of beyond the movies, this overarching kind of joy and love for Buffalo and storytelling, where I could start to blend, storytelling for myself and storytelling for others, because everyone has a story, and everyone has, whether it's simply a marketing story, we want to get more people through the door, or we want more clicks or more action on our website, to, we want to tell this, story of this nonprofit that's, celebrating this woman figure here in Buffalo. And I mean, so my evolution, has just been so eclectic in terms of, music and creating, video, and different pieces, because everyone has a story that they're proud of. And I get to meet people on those grounds where we're coming from it, at a place of joy, just like the piece that we, just did for you, which is an amazing accomplishment. It's like we want to celebrate, we want to move to that joy. And this is the energy that, I've aligned with my life, that, this is what I go to work, every day. David, I'm in the same chair whether I'm on vacation, writing music or writing a piece for someone. Like if I was going to, I went through the free fall, of not knowing what was next. So now I've tried to align my what I love to do with my work. And, I sit with two giant computer screens around me and with a swivel chair, and I'm kind of like Rick Wakeman from Yes, playing on one hand here, I'm doing something, and another hand I'm, kind of playing. And I've tried to align what I love to do with this service component, with this movie making component, with the commercial component, and still make myself, realize I'm still learning. You know what I'm saying? It's
constant, right?
It's constant.
Right. That self-reflection, that self determination or growth never stops, right? And should never stop for a business owner, for an entrepreneur, for any individual that's looking and being introspective and really challenging yourself to say, I know what I'm doing, but is there a different way to look at this or to think about this? And I think that's so important to, even as we get older and gain more experience, to be self-reflective and not to presume anything and to continually challenge yourself. I'm curious, Pete, I had such an honor it was to be at the grand opening of the rock opera about Crystal Beach that you filmed, and I know you really brought the community together. And I spent a couple days there with you, listening to the stories of others. How gratifying was that experience for you to have hosted this pretty unique and pretty special event over at the North Park, and just seeing the community come in and share their stories, which were so important, about their lives, their upbringings, their experiences at Crystal Beach. Give our listeners a little sense of what that experience meant to you.
Sure. I'll actually take you through a couple of those, because the North Park is an amazing community stage that we have here, that they just do an enormous job there of understanding, that commitment and value of community storytelling and how that honors so many people. And so I have had a few premieres there. You have to remember, Laugh in the Dark, the Crystal Beach one that you're alluding to, was very special because that was another place that we shared so much history, in. That it was driven by a love of, the people that made that park so special, our friends, your mom, you shared a special family connection with that park. And, to be able to, again, tap that childhood sense of wonder, that entity alone brings a smile to somebody, just mention it to them. If you're old enough to remember Crystal Beach, and even if you weren't, there could be some place in your life that you look back with this state of just, we were kids, we were happy, it was generational. You went there expecting to have fun. You left with a memory, whether you went there one time, on a corporate picnic, or you were fortunate to be living up there like we did for the summers. You left there with a cherished memory and a sucker to last a lifetime. And I wanted to capture that musically and visually. So we filmed in 5 vintage parks. Again, every one of them, Crystal Beach, how can we help you? It's just this kinetic energy of respect, and appreciation of joy. But those moments are, of the premieres, they are so short-lived, but they are an important process of bringing community together. It's certainly important in my process, and the one before that, Bubble Girl, is about hope and overcoming, illness with the healing power of the imagination. It's a film that we shot over 5 years with Roswell. That also had family in the film as well. These are ways of reimagining Buffalo from my brain, and music is often a driver. I'm often hearing these feelings before I assign visuals to them. So these moments of sharing, Queen City was the same thing. It was a musical love letter to Buffalo. There was, 5 Grammy winners on that soundtrack who all came here from Buffalo, many for the first time. And, in those situations, I'm kind of like an ambassador to Buffalo, and I don't need to sell Buffalo, but of course, I want people to understand what an amazing community that we have here, and we've lived in the heart of it. We've felt its pulse. We feel its cadence. We understand what the winter is like, and then here we are, in the middle of May, where everything's changing. I mean, yes, I know which way the light looks on City Hall June in an afternoon. I mean, I've studied, Buffalo, visually in many different ways. Stuff is in my kind of creative quiver, but I'm a storyteller at heart, and I've found a way to kind of honor that process. And these gatherings, these events, they have a value to kind of understand that we're all part of a bigger story, and that, whether you were on the film as crew, or whether you were someone who donated, a location, it's like, this has been a way for me to kind of communicate like my love for people and my love for story, and give back to the community in a way that, I feel like brings out the best in people inherently. Because, if I tell people we're making a film, we're making a music video about this, they're usually excited about it, and I don't have to sell it, and I don't know, again, this gets this whole idea of, trading in a different currency that I feel like I have my whole life. It hasn't made sense, in so many ways, but it has this inherent value, and suddenly, I'm trading in smiles and in energy and
does it ever? I mean, does it ever? That is so unique, Pete, and so admirable that the currency you're trading in is not the traditional one, and what joy you've brought to others, I think, is so important and so compelling. And I've been there firsthand for the ride, and seen people at your films smile and laugh and cry, and those emotions are what makes us who we are.
Human.
It's just amazing. Give our listeners a sneak peek. What, in terms of feature films or rock operas or musicals, what can we look forward to? How can we participate? How can I be in it? Tell us what your next of dream is.
Well, I'm actually 12 days into one. I think it's important. I don't want to get into a filmmaking seminar here, but it is important overall to have, if you can use time as an ally, that's very important, because it helps you gain a higher vantage point on things that you might be working on. So I am 12 days out of 18 on a New Orleans musical that is primarily being shot here. All the interiors are being shot here, and the exteriors have already been filmed in New Orleans. Instead of going down and spending 6 weeks away from my life source here, I went down and spent 4 days. Big difference. Again, experience, understanding what that was. I still packed up my pickup truck with everything from 1940s borrowed bicycle to, my camera and lens and wardrobe, and drove down and shot in the French Quarter. But I was coming at it from a place of wisdom at this point, and so I've just learned, and I love to storytell about the places that I know. I mean, Buffalo, New Orleans, Crystal Beach. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it's like, those, I could start singing songs about these places. It's just, they're in my DNA. So I'm currently combining these places that I love, Buffalo and New Orleans, into a New Orleans musical comedy that, the music has all been done. Over the pandemic, I got very far ahead in music because I was able to still connect musically, but not necessarily get together and film. So I've had these songs, literally about 60 of them, marinating. I have enough for an entire series. And 18 of them comprise this film called St. Peter Street, which we have already begun filming here. And I'm going to be trying to pick off the rest of the remaining days this summer. Again, deploying a stop-start strategy, which brings a lot of eases logistics. It just brings a lot of strength to the production. So it's kind of like a musical Young Frankenstein with my typical quirkiness. It's shifts between genres of music and going back to ragtime, and we already have probably 35 musicians who have participated, and the list keeps growing, both on camera and off camera. It's just a joy. And am I a scared school kid every time that I step foot on those sets? Yes, because you're hoping everything goes well, you're managing. But again, I know what my intentions are, and it's just to kind of let everyone do what they do and have a joy and walk away feeling like this was, kind of special. And, I sometimes I feel like you can't lose if those are your intentions,
Amen. And I know I speak for others when I say how excited I am for that world premiere, and we'll certainly let our listeners know when that does happen. Before I let you go, Pete,
Sure.
I'd stay here all day with you, actually. This has been super fun. But the storytelling and then commercializing it, somehow having the foresight or the vision to realize that you had a gift, and your gift translated into these feature films 7 different times, working on an 8th now, and plus a million other related projects. But you referenced, Celino and Barnes. Obviously, Town Automotive Group, Rupp Pfalzgraf has become, a client that is near and dear to your heart, I know, because of our relationship. And seeing your skill, your talent, your emotion, your ability to tell at least my law firm's history is so unique and so cool. I'm curious as to whether you think there's more there, whether you think you could take this sort of unique talent that you have, look at a business, a big business, a small business, an entrepreneur, a bank, whatever it is, but sort of capture their spirit, capture the essence of that business. How do you do that?
Well, it's the same mechanics coming from a place of joy and a skill set of storytelling. I mean, I have written narratives, scripts on people's biographies. I have put people's lives into song. I have told companies' histories and either in short form, like commemorative anniversary, spots versus longer promos. It still gives me the tingles because I'm coming at it from the same place. It's just I carve time for my own stories, and I spend my working hours, writing and creating stuff for other people who are ready. They might not know exactly what they need, but there's this trust, and I am absolutely working on it. I, just wrote a jingle over the weekend for somebody out in Arizona. So it's it's a constant. I market other people very well. I don't market myself very well. So these opportunities are wonderful to kind of, again, get lost out of translation and recognize that, I'm always approachable. I have to say it's important. I think we were talking about advice for entrepreneurs out there. It is important to protect your time and be courageous enough to do that. I've always said I really love being a master of my time. I said that in college. My Susan will attest to that. I mean, time is a currency. It is a transfer of energy, and it is easy to say yes because we want to be agreeable. But time disappears and attention becomes fragmented. So it's important to trade your attention for the things that you want your life to become. And I know I want to become, a master storyteller. And I know I've hit it at points. I know it's never about perfection or anything like that. I think that it's important to realize that we are always working towards continuous improvement versus perfection. I think we live in a culture that kind of markets perfection and misses out on so much because it is the self-discovery that you were talking about and the imperfections that, certainly make life much more interesting in terms of art and in terms of just a human story. So, I will continue and endeavor to, as Herman Melville once said, to try, and even if you fail in originality, then to succeed in imitation. You just have to continue to put yourself out there in this trust. And like I said, with these films, they're just bigger pieces. It's the same mechanics, whether or not it's a 30-second, spot that is, designed to help somebody. But I am more than approachable, and always like to hear what people are, have in mind. Because I'm me, I'm always up for a challenge, and I will go confidently in a direction of dreams. And if that's a shared thing, it just makes it even more enjoyable. Watching your face glow on that amazing evening, when your film, the commemorative film premiered, was incredibly special because you could feel the love, and it just kind of brings that out. There's just something about music and visual and storytelling that takes people away, and just lets them have a feeling. And as an artist, it's always been about going after that feeling, for me. And that's musically and that's visually. It's not so much nailing it or knocking it off or bucket lists for me. It's just about, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to go for that feeling. And in doing so, you have a lot of control over that, because so much of that is attitude and perspective. So inspiring, Pete. And I know for 54 years you've put yourself out there and taken risks that others wouldn't have, and had some success and had some failures. And I don't think it's ironic that this morning when I woke up at 5 a.m. and got my morning coffee and turned on the TV, that literally the first thing I heard or saw was your voice on an advertisement for Town Automotive Group. And it brought a smile to my face. You brought a great energy to that take. And it was like, I know I'm going to be with you at 10:30 today, and so fortunate to be in this position for all these years with you. Proud father of 3, going on a 30-year marriage, successful family business. What's next? You're going to continue to storytell. You're going to continue to make these feature films. Any other dreams or ideas or goals that our listeners can expect from you in the future, Pete? Well, personally, I think creatively, I have released several soundtrack records on vinyl with this Protean studio project band called Pete and the Amusements. But approaching the tender age of 55, I'm long overdue for a solo album, which has already been recorded. I just haven't had time to put it out there. So, that's a personal, creative one. That's kind of mile marker. That's kind of on the distant horizon. What am I most excited about? Again, getting back to, if you can align your gifts with what you love to do, that is just such a blessing, and it's just such a prescription to avoid burnout. I'd like to think that I embrace every day with the joy and gratitude of just finding more ways to inspire. I think life is too short. It's fragile. You need to be kind to yourself, you need to be kind to others, and you need to be kind to the planet. And you got a real good shot of things working out if that's how you're coming at things. And I do think the happiest people want what they have. I'm not a fan of bigger is better. I think that's often a mistake that a lot of people, can miss out on. I think blinders can be put on people just looking vertically versus kind of focusing and looking in a more of a broad view. Focusing on what you don't have, embracing the moment, along with your limitations, and realizing that your limitations are really strengths to be uncovered. I think that's where a lot of the good stuff comes from, and certainly not holding yourself back and putting yourself out there. So I think that kind of gratitude gets back to kind of the happiest people kind of want what they have. If you're asking me what I'm hopeful for, I have to go to more of a philosophical. I have to go there again and just say that I think compassion, understanding, love, and kindness will always outshine things like greed and power and the fear and the need to control. I think when you let those possessive forces just go, you start to see everything differently. So my parting words would be, let's just keep creating and sharing and helping each other find purpose and find self-worth and find joy. And there are more stories to tell. That's
incredible, Pete. I don't think I've had an end to a podcast that was more meaningful to me personally and than that. So I can't begin to thank you for sharing your story, for being vulnerable and telling us all about your journey. I know there's a lot more to come, and I'm going to be a firsthand observer in all of it, and am so fortunate and blessed to be in that position. So thank you again for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was my favorite one yet. That was awesome.